Hello everybody, my name is Doomwake, and today we are here to discuss the Pioneer format as always, but more specifically the regional championship that will be taking place the first weekend of June in lovely Dallas, Texas. This is an event that you needed to qualify for. You needed to win a regional championship qualifier, which you may or may not have done. However, they will also be having last chance qualifier events. I've had quite a few questions and people ask me over the past couple of weeks about what deck I would recommend for Dallas. Well, since I will be attending the event, unfortunately, to play in last chance qualifiers because I did not have the luxury of qualifying, but I wanted to go over the decks that I would advocate bringing to the event anyways, because the event is only a couple of weeks away. Now, there are a few on this list that you might be familiar with, but one specifically that you may not have heard before if you're not a regular watcher of the channel or my Twitch stream, and that just so happens to be the deck that I am the strongest leaning towards playing. Let's get into it. Alright, let's get started with the deck that you are likely the most familiar with if you've seen any Pioneer coverage over the recent years at this point, not even sure how long it's been, and that is Rakdos Midrange. This deck was popularized with the printing of Fable the Mirror Breaker, one of the most hotly contested cards, and not only Standard, people kind of assume it's just going to get the axe at this point, but also Pioneer. People are, a lot of people are advocating for the banning of Fable. Well, we're not going to get into that today. What my stance on that is, maybe a little separate video, but this is your mid-range deck of the format. This has the best tools at fighting the mid-range fight. It's got the best interaction with Fatal Push and Thoughtseize, the best kind of mid-range plane in the form of Fable the Mirror Breaker and Shield of the Apocalypse, and then it also just has the innate ability to present a very aggressive curve when needed. You have stuff like Bloodtithe Harvester, Reckoner, Bankbuster, and Graveyard Trespasser alongside Bonecrusher Giant to really put the screws into your opponent if they are not prepared for fighting an aggressive fight. But you also have the tools to go incredibly long because Fable provides so many cards. You have a ton of utility lands here. You see a variety of them with Hive of the Eye Tyrant, Den of the Bugbear, Mutavault, Sokinzon, Takenuma, anything like that. And then you also have access to, again, the best interaction, Fatal Push, Thoughtseize, some of the best cards in the format at dealing with opposing strategies. And then you also have some very robust sideboard tools as well. You get to play Extinction Event against Mono Green, Go Blank against the graveyard strategies. You get to play additional sweepers, more discard spells in the form of Duress. Now, I'm highlighting this specific list because I am a big fan of playing not only 4 copies of Shield of the Apocalypse, I'm also a very big advocate of not playing Castle Locthwain and also playing Mutavault. So keep those differences in mind. There's plenty of different Rakdos mid-range decks out there. You can, go and view all the different lists, but this is the one that I think I would recommend if you are, if you want to play this deck in Dallas, and it is very likely the best deck in the format, and you can't go wrong with it. Next up on our list, this one's for all you combo lovers out there, this is Greasefang. So the goal of this deck is to dump a large vehicle into the graveyard as quickly and as consistently as possible. The one that you are mainly going for here is Parhelion, and the joke here is you put a Parhelion into the graveyard on turn 2 via either Rafine's Informant to discard it from your hand. You can also mill it over with Grizzly Salvage or Witherbloom Command. And then also there are some games, and keep this in mind, where you do want to Thoughtseize yourself either on turn 1 or turn 2. Those don't come up as often, but it is a line that is available to you. And then once you have Parhelion in the graveyard, you cast the Rat God, Greasefang Okiba Boss, put the Parhelion into play, which the Greasefang gives it haste, and then attack your opponent for, I can't even count that high. Now, why is this deck good? It is incredibly consistent at putting Parhelion into the graveyard. As we talked about, you have a lot of ways to bin that. You even have the good defensive tools that you saw in the Rakdos mid-range deck. So you see Thoughtseize in the main deck, as well as Fatal Push here in the sideboard, and then you can kind of pick and choose as to when you want to play those. You just have to be a little bit careful because Greasefang is a deck that definitely has a target on its back. So you have to be careful about people sideboarding very specific targeted graveyard hate cards, things like Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void. You saw the aforementioned Go Blank in the Rakdos mid-range deck. And at its core, this deck is relying on a 3-mana 4/3. So if you can remove the 4/3 from the battlefield, you might be okay. Now, you would think that, however, this deck has a very robust plan B, in the form of Essica's Chariot, which also happens to be a vehicle to help your consistency on Greasefang. Now, Chariot on turn 3 may not race some of the other linear non-interactive decks, but you can imagine against the Rakdos mid-range deck that we looked at, if you put this card into play on turn 3 and attack and make 3 2/2s, the game's probably going to be over. The Rakdos mid-range deck isn't very well equipped to deal with that kind of pressure that early on in the game. And then you also have additional tools to help sometimes fight the opposing graveyard hate cards in the form of Witherbloom Command. Given the fact that Rest in Peace is one of the more commonly played graveyard hate cards, this being able to both blow up Rest in Peace and also pick off an elf or something against Monograin, the most common line here is kill your elf and destroy your Wolfwillow Haven, which is effectively a double Stone Rain for 2 mana. That can be an extremely backbreaking play, excuse me. And then, yeah, just like I said, the added consistency, you also have Traverse the Ulvenwald to help you find Greasefang. And then you'll notice here in the sideboard, I've highlighted this list specifically because I think this is the list that it looks the cleanest to me. I kind of like cutting, I've seen some people play Scrapwork Mutt and then Mana Confluence in the mana base to help facilitate the red mana that you need to get the Scrapwork Mutt back, but I'm not as big of a fan of that. I think I'd rather be on the 4 Witherbloom Command and, you know, these kind of numbers here. The Collective Brutalities main deck I like quite a bit. And then in the sideboard, you also have Shieldred, which is an additional tool to help you fight those grindy type games. So, yeah, if you're into the combo type stuff, you can do no wrong playing Greasefang, and that is a deck that I would recommend if you're into that sort of thing. This one's for all you Splinter Twin lovers out there. This is Indomitable Creativity. Now, you might think, for those of you who may have seen the modern versions of this deck, you might think that this is essentially a straight-up combo deck, and why wouldn't I kind of group it or classify it as the combo deck? Well, this specific version that I've highlighted here, the one that is playing Torrential Gearhulk as your main payoff card that you want to creativity into, this is kind of become the more popular version of creativity at this point. You saw with the most recent Pro Tour, people were playing Worldspine Worm Xenagos to one-shot people, but people quickly realized that that strategy is pretty easily invalidated by a single bounce spell, maybe like an Otawara potentially, or Wandering Emperor. There's a lot of ways to break that up. So the nice thing about this Gearhulk deck is you have the ability to present a fast Gearhulk in the sense of turn 4, but what you're Gearhulking into is Magma Opus, which is an incredibly powerful card balanced around the fact that it costs 8 mana, but if you're discarding it to its own ability on turn 2 to make a treasure, and then Gearhulking off of creativity on turn 4 to put it into play, you're effectively cheating 4 mana on Magma Opus, and that is incredibly powerful. Now, Magma Opus itself has what it does, you can see the card here, it has a lot of different text on it. Makes a 4/4, draws some cards, kills some things, taps some permanents. And the nice thing about it is that presents a very quick clock. So this deck has the ability to race the other non-interactive decks. But what it also does have is the ability to play a much longer game than your traditional creativity decks. You'll notice the Fables here. That card's great. We don't need to talk about Fable. It's good at enabling creativity. It makes a token. The token makes treasures. But the control element here, you have a plethora of removal spells. You have Fiery Impulse, Spikefield Hazard, you have Make Disappear as a counter spell, Volcanic Spite, which is nice because you can put Gearhulks back in the bottom of your deck if you want a creativity into them. But the whole goal here is, again, Magma Opus discards itself, so it puts itself into the graveyard. You don't even need to find a Prismari Commander or Fable to discard it. And then the traditional line of just hard casting Gearhulks, it only costs 6 mana, and then you can also, again, Opus make treasures. So you can easily see here where the control plan of just, Gearhulking Magma Opus over and over and over again is really good and helps provide you the stability in the long game against the stuff like Rakdos midrange and blue-eye control. So that's why I think I prefer this creativity version. Now, there's so many different versions. Again, we talked about Worldspine Worm Xenagos. There are people playing Atraxa. There are people playing just 2 copies of Worldspine Worm. But I think this is the most well-rounded creativity deck, and if you're looking to specifically play this card, this is definitely the list I would recommend. And like we hinted in the intro, now we get the wild card, which actually is the deck that I am leaning towards the most to play in Dallas, and that is the Boros Convoke deck. Now, for those of you who have been watching the channel over the past couple of weeks, you have seen a couple of videos that I posted of this deck, and I am absolutely in love with this strategy. The first instance that I remember seeing this was when Aspiring Spike, big shout out to Spike, by the way, was playing it on his channel in Modern. Now, in Modern, you get some additional upgrades. You get more copies of Kuldotha Rebirth effectively with, actual Kuldotha Rebirth, and you get more Bushwhackers, Mem Knights. There's a lot of stuff you get in Modern, but I wanted to port that into Pioneer. And the concept here is you're playing a lot of cheap creatures and stuff that makes tokens to enable these expensive Convoke cards, which you can cast for free if you have tokens in play. So Knight Errant of Eos and Venerated Luxodon, they both have their own respective abilities. Luxodon puts counters on stuff that you convoked with it. Knight Errant draws some cards. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to amass just this giant battlefield, tons of tokens, and then finish the game off with Reckless Bushwhacker. Now, this particular configuration, as of right now, these are the numbers that I like, but there has been so many different iterations on this deck. People are playing, I remember looking at League Dump, I think it was a couple of days ago, where there was 3 different lists, and they all had these different flex spots. So to give you an idea of where I see this deck, I think there's a core 32 cards that you are likely required to play, and then the last 9 or 10 flex spots you can kind of mix and match. So I would recommend always playing 4 Ornithopter, Thraben Inspector, Voldaren Epicure. These are kind of your artifact enablers for Gleeful Demolition. Burning Tree Emissary, Reckless Bushwhacker. Please do not cut these cards. They're essential to making sure that you can race the other non-interactive and linear decks. Knight Errant of Eos and Luxodon, I wouldn't cut a single copy of these because this is your payoff, right? You're playing a lot of more weak individual cards to enable these big payoffs. So I would not recommend cutting these because you want to see at least one in every opening hand. And then the Gleeful Demolitions as well. Your best draw, and I will frequently keep any one land hand that has Ornithopter and Gleeful Demolition, that's your best start. You want to see that every single opening hand because it just enables a lot more of your busted draws. And then after those 32, you can kind of mix and match a little bit. So you see I've trimmed a Legion Loyalist. I had 4 for a while. I'm actually thinking about going down to 2 because this card, while good, it's only good, I think, in matchups that you're likely already favored in. And then you have, again, these sweet one-ofs like Plarg, which are mainly playing for the back half Augusta. You have a couple Forbidden Friendships. I have a spicy one-of, cheeky one-of Throne of the God Pharaoh. No idea if this card's good. This is mostly untested, but the theory is strong because it's also a card you can cast off of Burning Tree Emissary, which normally, you can't cast any of, your white creatures off of, because Burning Tree makes red-green mana, so you can't cast the white spells off of it. Legion's Landing, I think, is a decent 2-of. It's nice because it also gives you a little boost of mana, so you can, play some stuff pre-combat, attack, flip the landing, and then post-combat play something else. And then the sideboard's kind of up in the air here. I've skewed the wedding announcements because I've tried those several times against Rakdos, and they really are not doing what I want them to do. So I'm choosing to go with 1 additional land to help facilitate the experimental frenzies in the sideboard. So trying that plan, but again, as long as you're playing the core 32, those last 10 or so spots, you can kind of mix and match. But this is the deck that I am considering the most, and the reason for that is because I think it has the best nut draws. This deck's average Goldfish is, I think, somewhere around 3.5, which not a lot of decks in Pioneer can say that. You have, mid to decent card advantage tools. You have a couple of utility lands. You have Legion's Landing, which can, when it flips, the flip side makes a bunch of 1/1 tokens every turn. You have Knight Errant of Eos to draw cards. So I think you have just the right amount of card advantage for a deck of, that has this low of a curve. And then the nice thing about this is you boast an incredibly good Mono Green and Lotus Field matchup. You are much faster than the non-interactive decks that people are currently playing. So I think this is the deck that I would definitely recommend, or the deck that I am currently leaning towards, and you can do no wrong playing this deck. And that is going to do it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed this little overview of decks that I would recommend playing in Dallas alongside with my personal recommendation. I would like to hear from you guys. Let me know if you are going to Dallas in the comment section down below, what you are planning on playing, whether you're playing the LCQs or if you're playing the main event itself, or if you're just going to hang out, because the Dream Hacks are a really good time, and I would recommend, even if you don't really plan on playing either of the LCQs or the main event, definitely give them a check out. They're awesome events, and I've been to a few of them, and I've been pretty happy every time. And like I said, let me know in the comment section down below what you thought, what you're playing, and with that, I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.